To say that week one of the college football season lived up to the hype would be an understatement. 3 top 10 matchups, every single one of them a fantastic game. We also had Florida State upset Alabama as a 2-touchdown underdog. We also had South Florida with a dominant win over Boise State at home on Thursday evening. What does week 2 have in store for us? I am Johnny Sports Network, here to provide you with my week 2 college football predictions. And the week 2 slate, it doesn't look as exciting as last week, but we still have some great games this week. The main 7 for this week: Kansas and Missouri, the renewal of an old Big 12 rivalry, Ole Miss and Kentucky, Vanderbilt and Virginia Tech, Baylor and SMU, Illinois and Duke, Iowa and Iowa State, and concluding with the game of the week, Michigan and Oklahoma. Without further ado, let's get to the week 2 college football predictions right here on the Johnny Sports Network. Beginning with Kansas and Missouri, a renewal of an old Big 12 rivalry. Kansas looking to bounce back from a rough season last year. However, I did mention in the week 0 predictions video that Kansas, they did hit their stride toward the end of last season. And week 0 against Fresno State, that was the Kansas team that was of the second half of the season last year. But they go on the road to take on a Missouri team that I don't think a lot of people have high expectations for them. But I think this season as a whole, I think Missouri is going to surprise some people. Last week, Sam Horn, he left with an injury after the first play of the game, and Penn State transfer Bo Prabula, he stepped in and he stepped up for Missouri. And to be honest, the 6.5 points that Missouri is currently favored by, it honestly feels like a little too many points to me. I feel like maybe 4.5 points would be more appropriate. But I am going to go with Missouri in this game to win outright. But I do think Jalen Daniels and Kansas, they do keep this game close to a field goal game. As long as Kansas plays clean football, they're going to have a chance to win this game. But I do think at the end of it, we will see Bo Prabula lead Missouri to victory in this game. And this is the moment that Bo Prabula has been waiting for. Back up at Penn State last season, enters the portal right before the college football playoff, and last week he stepped up for Missouri, and I think he steps up for Missouri again this week. Missouri by a field goal. Ole Miss and Kentucky. Kentucky pulled off the upset last season in Oxford, and it was part of what left Ole Miss out of the college football playoff. Both teams with new quarterbacks for this season. For Ole Miss, Austin Simmons, 3 touchdown passes, 2 interceptions against Georgia State last week. Zach Calzada for Kentucky, mainly known for his upset win over number 1 Alabama back when he was at Texas A&M. But last week he really struggled. 85 passing yards against Toledo. Kentucky, they did get the job done despite being a team that a lot of people predicted could be upset in week 1 against a underrated Toledo team, a Toledo team that are the favorites in the MAC, at least in my opinion, behind a 129 rushing yard performance by Nebraska transfer running back Dante Dowdle. We have seen Mark Stoops' Kentucky teams have good efforts against teams that we would not expect. For example, last season against Georgia, a 13-12 game. But has Mark Stoops lost the locker room a little bit? At the end of last season, there was a video captured of one of Kentucky's players going to the concession stands in the middle of a game. And at that point, even some Kentucky fans were saying that Mark Stoops has lost the locker room. I think that Zach Calzada is going to have the performance he had with A&M against Alabama if Kentucky's going to have a chance at winning this game. Because Ole Miss, they are out for redemption. And I don't see an upset this time around. I'm going to go with Ole Miss to win convincingly. Vanderbilt and Virginia Tech. And the big storyline for this game. Vanderbilt quarterback Diego Pavia was very vocal in the offseason. Very vocal about how they're going to defeat Alabama once again. How Vanderbilt is going to win the national championship. And many college football fans are just wanting to root for his downfall. And last year when Vanderbilt, they had the season they had, it started with an overtime victory against Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech is looking to bounce back after a loss to South Carolina in Atlanta this past Sunday. And it was a game that Virginia Tech, they were in for a very long time. 10-8 at the half. But a punt return by South Carolina is what changed the tide in that game. And I did talk about it in the best of the rest, that Virginia Tech last season, despite their record last season, they were competitive in a lot of games. 5 losses by 1 possession, if I remember that correctly. And Vanderbilt opened up as about a 2.5, 3-point underdog. But it's now down to a 1.5 that Virginia Tech is favored by. But I am going to go with Virginia Tech in this ball game. I liked their effort against South Carolina last week. It was a game that they were in longer than I thought they were going to be in. And I do think they get redemption this week and take down Vanderbilt. Baylor and SMU. Baylor is looking to bounce back after losing to Auburn last week at home. And they go on the road to take on SMU, one of the many teams who flew under the radar last season. SMU made the ACC championship game, made the college football playoff. Baylor quarterback Sawyer Robertson, he threw for over 400 passing yards against Auburn last week. But the downfall for Baylor in that game was not being able to stop Auburn quarterback Jackson Arnold on the ground. Jackson Arnold had 137 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns in that game. Can they slow down SMU quarterback Kevin Jennings this week? SMU was 83rd in pass defense last season. Baylor was 100th. And this is a game that I am completely conflicted on, because I do want to pick Baylor to bounce back from last week, but I just truly don't know if they're going to be able to stop Kevin Jennings. I'm going to pick SMU in this game, but it's not going to be the end of the season for Baylor if they were to lose this game and fall to 0-2 on the year. Losing 2 non-conference games, they're still going to be a contender in the Big 12. Plus, Baylor did not have a good start to the season last year as well, and then they had a 6-game winning streak going into the bowl season. But I am expecting this to be a high-scoring game won by SMU because I don't think Baylor's defense can just magically make those adjustments at stopping the quarterback run overnight, which is why I'm going to pick SMU. Illinois and Duke. Immediately, what stuck out to a lot of people, I think, about this matchup, Illinois a 2.5 point favorite. I think when people were looking at the point spreads for the games this week, they saw Illinois at -2.5, and they thought, why is that? That feels like way too small of a margin for Illinois. Illinois should be favored by more than that. But it turns out that this is probably Illinois' biggest game in over 2 decades, because this is the highest that I have seen Illinois ranked in the last 2 decades. And going on the road against a Duke team that they're really good at stopping the run, and Illinois' specialty is running the football. It's Brett Bielema's style of football. And what people are going to say about Duke is they struggled against Elon last week. They were in a battle against Elon for a part of the game. Yes, you can say that, but last week was week 1. We're going to see a lot of teams struggle not only in that week, but probably this week as well, and maybe to an extent, maybe next week. Because it takes about 2 or 3 games for teams to really start to show their full potential sometimes. But when I see Illinois as a 2.5 point favorite, I immediately think this is going to be a trap game for Illinois. And I am not afraid to pick upsets. Some people may think that I am, but I am not. And I'll pick the upset right now. I'm going to take Duke to upset Illinois, even though this may come back to haunt me because perhaps a lot of the public may think that as well. But I'm not afraid to pick upsets. I will take Duke to pull out this upset. I think Manny Diaz is underrated, always has good defenses. And I think Duke's defense will be the difference in this game in stopping Illinois' specialty, the Brett Bielema specialty of running the football. Iowa and Iowa State in the battle for the Cy-Hawk Trophy. Iowa does lead the all-time series 47-24. However, Iowa State has taken 2 of the last 3. I do remember saying in the week 0 predictions that Iowa State this season is playing with a chip on their shoulder after losing the way they did in the Big 12 championship game. And Rocco Becht said in the post-game press conference that they are going to be back next season. Iowa, they acquired South Dakota State transfer quarterback Mark Gronowski from the transfer portal in the offseason. And Iowa fans, they did talk about how that he is the quarterback that Iowa, they have been needing. But last week against Albany, he only threw, I think it was 44 passing yards. For this game, I am going to predict a low-scoring game like it has been the last few times that we have seen them face off against each other. Currently, the over-under for this game is 41.5 points. And there has been less than 42 points scored in this matchup in 5 of the last 6 games between these two teams. But I am going to pick Iowa State in this game. Iowa State, they have the better quarterback in this matchup. I remember picking against Iowa State multiple times last season, but I did not in week 0, and they pulled through, and I'm going to not pick against them this week. I'm going to pick Iowa State to win, and we'll see if they pull through again. And finally, the game of the week, Michigan and Oklahoma. For Michigan, quarterback Bryce Underwood makes his first career start on the road in Norman in primetime, hostile environment. While Oklahoma, they acquired Washington State transfer quarterback John Mateer in the transfer portal. And I was really impressed with John Mateer last season. I think he's the most underrated quarterback in all of college football. Oklahoma, they also acquired Cal transfer running back Jaden Ott in the transfer portal, but he only had one carry in the game last week against Illinois State. For Michigan, running back Justice Haynes, the Alabama transfer, 159 rushing yards last week on 16 carries and 3 touchdowns. Bryce Underwood against New Mexico last week in his college football debut, 21 of 31, 251 yards and a touchdown pass. And Bryce Underwood, he did not have to do anything fancy in that game. He just had to manage the game. Michigan, they ran the football. They had 201 rushing yards as a team last week in that game against New Mexico. And I think it's the same game plan for Michigan, is they want to run the football and take some pressure off of Bryce Underwood. And the keys to the game for me are simple. Can Michigan run the football on Oklahoma's defense? Because if Oklahoma contains Michigan's running game and forces Bryce Underwood to have to make throws, to make plays to win the game, I think Michigan could be in trouble due to his lack of experience. John Mateer last week against Illinois State, even though these numbers may not mean much because it was Illinois State, 30 of 37, 392 yards, 3 touchdown passes, and an interception. But this matchup is between a quarterback making his second start in college football against a quarterback who has played a full season of college football. But I am going to go with Oklahoma in this game because I do see Oklahoma stacking the box for a big portion of the game and forcing Michigan to have to win with Bryce Underwood making plays in a very hostile Norman environment. And that will do it for my Week 2 college football predictions. And that is the end of my Tuesday doubleheader, as I have already uploaded the Week 1 NFL predictions today. The best of the rest video will be out tomorrow. And we have 6 games for the best of the rest this week. Oklahoma State and Oregon, Army and Kansas State, Stanford and BYU, Boston College, Michigan State, Arizona State and Mississippi State, and South Florida and Florida. South Florida upsetting Boise State in dominant fashion in Week 1. And now they go on the road in Gainesville to take on Florida. Just imagine if South Florida pulls off another upset. And then they also play Miami in Week 3, which things could get interesting. But until next time, Vegas is always watching.